All right, we are going to get right into Chapter 10, Lesson 7, Compare and Order Decimals. We've compared numbers before, so this shouldn't be too bad. To compare decimals, you can use a number line or place value. So let's just get right into the first example. At recess, Austin and his friends decided to have two races. One was 0.2 or 0.2 of a mile, and the other one was 0.4 or 0.4 of a mile. Which race was longer? So one way to compare the two fractions is to use a number line. We would graph 0.4, which would be right here, and 0.2, which would be right here. 0.4 is to the right of 0.2, right here. So 0.4 is greater than 0.2. Another way to compare is to use place value. Line up the decimal points, then compare the digits in each place value position. In the tenths place, 4 is greater than 2. So 4/10 is greater than 2/10. So the longer race was the one that was 4/10. Notice that you can only compare 0.4 and 0.2 because they refer to the same whole, which is 1 mile. Okay, very easy. Moving on to the second example. We're going to put 1500ths, 3800ths, and 3/10 in order from greatest to least. So the first thing you want to do is line up your decimal points. This is the main thing to remember. The decimal points need to always be in a line. You place a 0 to the right of 3/10, so all numbers have the same number of decimal places. For example, this one has a 1 in the 10th place, a 3 in the 10th place, a 3 in the 10th place, and this one had a 5 in the 100th place, and this one had an 8 in the 100th place, but this one had nothing. If you have a number that has nothing in one of the place values, you put a 0 there. So now you're going to compare the digits in each place value position. In the 10th place, 1 is less than 3. So 1500ths is the least decimal in the hundredths place. So this one is least, okay? So if I'm ordering them from greatest to least, I know that the one that is least is going to go at the end of my list, okay? So 1500ths is the least decimal. In the hundredths place, 8 is greater than 0, so 3800ths is the greatest decimal, okay? So if you compare these two numbers, they're the same, so you have to move to the hundredths place, and if the 8 is greater than the 0 that's there, you have to put 3800ths and then 3000ths, okay? Or you don't actually have to include that 0 because it's not in the original number. So to check that, you could place them in these models, and you can see that 1500ths only has a 1/10 and 500ths colored in. 3000ths or 3/10 has 3/10 colored in, and 3800ths has 3/10 and 800ths colored in. So this has the fewest amount, this one has the next, and this one has the greatest amount. So in order from greatest to least is 3800ths, 3/10, and 1500ths, okay? Down here, starting at number 1, we're going to compare these numbers, and you're going to use greater than, less than, or equal to compare the numbers. So when I'm looking at 2/10 and 6/10, if I look at my ones place, they both have 0, so I know I'm going to have to look at the 10ths place. In the 10ths place, I have a 2 and a 6. Since the 6th is greatest, or the greater number than 2, I know that 2/10 is less than 6/10. On number 2, if I look in the ones place, they both have 0s. If I look in the tenths place, I have a 4 and a 0. Since the 4 is larger than the 0, I know that 4/10 is greater than 4/100ths. On number 3, I have 6/10 and 60/100ths. So I'm going to look at the ones place first. They both have 0s. Then I'm going to look at the 10ths place next. Uh-oh, they both have a 6. Then if I need to compare the hundredths place, that means I have to put a 0 here so that they both have a number in the hundredths place. So if I compare now, I have 0.60 and 0.60. Well, that is exactly the same or equal. okay? If you don't have a number in one of the places, you have to put a 0 there to be able to compare, okay? Looking at that, you know, just looking at it, you would say, oh, 60 is greater than 6, and automatically put your less than sign there, and it would be wrong because they're actually equal, okay? Moving on to number 4, in my ones place, I have 0, so those are both the same. So I have to move to my tenths place. I have a 5 in the tenths place here and a 7 in the tenths place here. My 7 in the tenths place is greater than my 5 in the tenths place. So 57 hundredths is greater than 7 tenths. Okay, now I have to order these numbers from greatest to least. So I want to be sure that I'm going greatest to least, not least to greatest. I got to pay attention to that. Okay, so if I compare the numbers, the first thing I want to do, just like they did up here, is I want to line up my decimal. Excuse me. So I'm going to say 0.2, 0.02, and 0.4. Okay, so I lined up my decimal. And if I want to go from greatest to least, I'm going to look in the ones place. They're all zeros, so I have to move to the tenths place. The greatest number in the tenths place is a 4. So I know that 0.4 is the greatest number. Then I have to look at my 2 remaining numbers. Of those 2 numbers, the 2 is the greatest number. So I say 0.2. And then finally, the one that's left is 0.02. I could have added zeros to these places and to see that, that I would have 40, 20, and 2. It would come out the same way, but if you just look at your place value, it's the same thing. Okay, let's try that on number 6. I'm going to write out all of these numbers. So I have 0.51, 0.34, excuse me, I keep coughing, and 0.46. Hold on, I got to cough again. Whew. Okay. All right, so if I'm comparing all of these zeros, they're all the same, so I need to move now to my tenths place. And remember, I'm going greatest to least. If I have a 5, a 3, and a 4, I know that my 5 is my greatest number, so I know that 0.51 or 51 hundredths is my greatest amount. Then I'm going to look at my next 2 amounts. I've got a 3 in this tenths place and a 4 in this tenths place. 4 is greater than 3, so I know that 0.46 or 46 hundredths is next. And then finally, the smallest decimal is 34 hundredths or 0.34. Okay, so somebody's cutting their grass outside. I think my allergies are getting me. Okay, so if you understood this, then you're going to do great on the next page. So let's work right through it. So I'm comparing using greater than, less than, or equal to. In the ones place, I have 0, so I need to move to the tenths place. I have a 5 and a 7 in my tenths place. 7 is greater than 5, so that one is 0.5 is less than 0.7. On number 8, I have 0.56 and 0.58. My zeros are the same, my 5s are the same, so then I'm comparing 6 and 8 in the hundredths place. 8 is larger, so my alligator mouth eats it. I swear I'm going to be okay. All right. Number 9, I've got 0 in the ones place, 8 in the tenths place, and zeros in the hundredths place. So I know that these 2 are equal. If there's nothing there, you add a 0. So if I showed you like this, 0.8 and then 0.80, when comparing, if there's nothing in an area, you put a 0, and then you can see very clearly that those are the same. On number 10, I've got zeros in my ones place, 3s in my tenths place, and an 8 and a 0 in my hundredths place. So that one is larger. On number 11, I've got zeros in my ones place, 9 in my tenths place, and zeros, just like this one, in my hundredths place, so those are equal. I'm gonna have to stop this video and start over if I don't get over this. All right, number 12. In my ones place, I have zeros. In my tenths place, I have a 2 and a 0. 2 is greater than 0, so that one is greater. On number 13, I've got zeros in my ones place, an 8 and a 7 in my tenths place. I don't need to go any further because this 8 is larger. On number 14, I've got 48 hundredths and 5 tenths, or 50 hundredths. So let's look at this. Zeros, don't need them. 4 and 5, which is larger, the 5. You just look at each place value at a time. Number 15, I've got zeros in the ones place. I have a 0 in the tenths place and a 7 in the tenths place. A 7 in the tenths place is larger. I'm actually going to stop this video because I obviously can't quit coughing. I feel pretty confident that you're going to be able to do the rest of this page. If you cannot, please shoot me some questions on Schoology and I will answer them for you. I'm sorry I didn't get through the whole video, but I'm trying to get it finished for you, and I can't quit coughing. So before I try the next one, I'll make sure that my coughing gets under control. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know, and then do the self-check on Schoology. Bye.